Before anything else in this story makes sense, you have to hear it. Listen. That slow, uneven knocking is an engine running, not failing, not misfiring, running exactly as designed. There is no spark plug inside it. There is no glow plug. It squeezes its fuel to about a third of the pressure the textbooks insist is needed to make heavy oil catch fire, and by every rule written in the century since, it should sit there cold and dead and silent. It does not. It has been making that noise for more than 130 years. It still makes it today, in fishing harbours where the ice comes in early, and on farms at the far end of tracks that do not appear on maps, long after the sophisticated, celebrated, properly engineered machines of its own generation were dragged out and sold for scrap. Go to any of those harbours and ask a man what he is running. He will tell you it is a Swedish engine. He will say it the way you would say the sea is salt, because everybody knows it, because his father said it and his grandfather said it before him. He is wrong. It was invented in a tin shed in Buckinghamshire by a man almost nobody has heard of, and it was built by the tens of thousands in a Lincolnshire market town. Britain made this thing, financed it, proved it, and shipped it to every working coastline on Earth. And then Britain lost it. Not to theft, not to a copyist with a drawing board and no conscience. Britain lost it in a fair fight. Twice, to men who asked a better question than anyone in Grantham thought to ask. Start with the trouble, because the trouble is the whole reason this engine exists at all. It is the 1880s. You want to drive something with an internal combustion engine, a pumping station, a mill wheel, a threshing set on a farm 11 miles from the nearest town. Your options are genuinely frightening. Coal gas works beautifully, provided somebody has run a pipe to your door, which nobody has, and nobody will. The light petroleum spirits work too, and they will also kill you, because this is an era that has not yet learned what it is handling. The stuff evaporates. It creeps along the floor. It finds a lamp flame at the far end of a workshop and comes back for you. Meanwhile, at the bottom of the barrel sits the fuel everyone actually wants. Paraffin, crude, the heavy residual grades that cost almost nothing, that you can store in a shed without lying awake about it, that are already being shipped around the world for lamps. The very thing that makes heavy oil safe is the thing that makes it useless. It will not light on command inside a cylinder, and the two obvious ways to force the issue are both closed in the 1880s. An electrical spark is the first. It works for about 10 minutes. Heavy oil burns filthy, and the soot lays a conducting film of carbon across the electrodes until the current takes the easy path. The gap goes dead, and you are standing over a warm lump of iron with a spanner in your hand. The delicate electrical systems of the period cannot fight that, and everyone who has tried already knows it. Shear compression is the second. Squeeze the charge hard enough, and the heat of the squeeze alone will set it alight. That is a correct piece of physics and a completely useless piece of engineering in 1885, because the metals and the machining to survive those pressures for more than a few minutes do not exist yet. Into that dead end walks Herbert Akroyd Stuart. He is not famous. He is not wealthy. He was born in Halifax in 1864, the son of a Paisley Scotsman who had set up the Bletchley Iron and Tin Plate Works down in Buckinghamshire, and after a short spell as a junior assistant in a London technical college, he goes home to his father's works and starts pulling oil engines apart. He has the particular kind of mind that fastens onto one problem and will not be reasoned off it. 7 patents in 5 years, all of them circling the same question from slightly different angles. And what finally opens the door for him is not a calculation or a drawing. It is a mess. One day in 1885, somebody at the works spills paraffin into a pot of molten tin. The paraffin flashes into vapor on contact and takes light from a lamp burning nearby, and there is a moment of noise and heat and shouting, and then it is over. In most workshops, that is a story you tell at the end of the shift and forget by the weekend. Akroyd Stewart looks at the scorch marks and sees something else entirely. The paraffin had not waited for the flame to come to it as a liquid. It had turned to vapor the instant it touched metal hot enough, and then it had gone up. The fuel that every engineer in Britain swore you could not ignite on demand ignites on demand, provided the surface you throw it at is glowing. I find this the most extraordinary part of the whole story, and I want to be honest about why. Every single thing that follows, an engine on a canal in Birmingham, an engine in a Japanese fishing village, an engine sitting in the Arctic ice for 2 winters waiting to be asked, is one man working out how to repeat a workshop accident deliberately, in rhythm, forever. By 1886, he has a prototype running. It is ugly and it is heavy, and it does the thing that could not be done. He bolts a cast iron chamber to the head of the cylinder, a bulb, and heats it from the outside with a blow lamp before starting. Then he sprays heavy oil into that glowing chamber, and it catches on contact with the iron exactly as the paraffin caught on the molten tin. No spark to soot up, no electrical gap to short out. None of the ferocious compression his rivals are chasing and cannot yet build for. A modest squeeze, a hot piece of metal, and the willingness of heavy oil to burn the moment it touches something red. In May of 1890, he files the patent that matters, number 7146, jointly with an engineer called Charles Richard Binney. The title is a mouthful in the manner of the period. Improvements in engines operated by the explosion of mixtures of combustible vapor or gas and air. Buried in that dry sentence is a machine that ignores the rules the rest of the industry is still in the process of writing. A patent, though, is a piece of paper in a drawer. Turning paper into iron takes capital, a factory, and somebody prepared to look foolish in front of his competitors. That somebody is Richard Hornsby. Hornsby Sons of Grantham is an established agricultural engineering firm with a solid reputation, the sort of business that has spent 60 years selling ploughs and seed drills and steam engines to farmers who do not forgive experiments. Other engineering companies are offered the license for the Akroyd engine and turn it down, and their reasoning is not stupid. They can see perfectly well that if this works, it competes with everything else they sell. Hornsby takes it anyway. From the 26th of June, 1891, the works at Grantham begin building the Hornsby Akroyd patent oil engine under license. If Akroyd Stewart is the mind, Hornsby is the money and the nerve, and without him there is no engine, only a drawing. In June of that year, the two of them put it in front of the only judges who matter, not the learned societies, farmers. 2 engines go on show at the Royal Agricultural Show at Doncaster, in front of hard-headed men who care nothing for theory and everything for whether the thing will start on a wet morning in February and keep going until the harvest is in. Now, before we go any further, you need to understand the one genuinely beautiful idea at the center of this machine, because everything else follows from it. The bulb does not stay hot because of the blow lamp. The blow lamp is a formality. It gets you started and then you put it away. Once the engine is turning, every firing stroke pushes its own heat into the walls of that iron chamber, and that stored heat is precisely what lights the next charge of fuel. The bulb glows because it just fired. It fires because it is glowing. Around and around, several hundred times a minute, each explosion paying for the next one. The engine is running on the memory of its own last cycle. Take the fuel away and the memory fades. The iron cools, and within a few minutes the machine simply forgets how to run and falls quiet. People sometimes ask whether this is the same thing as the glow plug in a model aircraft engine, and it is worth a moment because the difference is the entire point. A glow plug is heated electrically. It has a battery behind it, or a coil, something outside itself feeding it energy. The hot bulb has nothing behind it at all. No wire, no cell, no current. Once that blow lamp is off, the only thing keeping the fire alive is the fire it has already made. And be clear about what those first Grantham machines were, because it matters enormously later. They were 4-stroke engines. Poppet valves, camshaft, timing gear, the full orthodox arrangement of the period, intake and compression, and power and exhaust marching in strict order under the command of hard steel. Rugged. Also heavy and full of things that can wear out. Hold that thought, because a lighter and far cleverer version of this idea is coming, and the difference between the two decides whose name ends up on the story. The numbers are where the genius hides. A hot bulb engine typically ran a compression ratio somewhere between 3:1 and 5:1. The compression ignition engines that would shortly be held up as the modern standard ran 15:1, sometimes 20, 4 or 5 times as much. On paper, that is humiliating. In practice, it was the whole trick. Low pressures mean low stresses, and low stresses mean you can build the thing out of ordinary cast iron to ordinary tolerances in an ordinary workshop, and it will run for 30 years. It will also burn practically anything you pour into it. Paraffin, crude straight out of the ground, vegetable oil. On the boats, when the season had been bad and nothing better was aboard, fish oil. And you did not start it with a key, because there was very often nothing to turn. Picture the ritual, because this is the part that men who grew up around these engines remember in their bones 50 years later. It is dark. You are crouched over the engine in the bottom of a small boat, and the first job is to get the blow lamp itself going, which means alcohol in the little tray under the burner, lit, left to warm the thing through, then pumped up until it hisses. Only now can you turn the flame on the bulb. Then you wait. 2 minutes. 5, if it is cold. You are watching the iron for the dull red that says it is ready, and you are judging that color by eye alone, the way a blacksmith reads heat with no gauge and no dial, because there is no gauge and there is no dial. Then you take hold of the flywheel and you swing it, back and forth, harder each time, building until it goes over. And here is the detail nobody expects. You are also hoping it catches the right way round. On the 2-stroke versions that came later, there is nothing in the engine that insists on a direction. It will run backwards perfectly happily if that is how it happens to fire, and then your propeller is turning the wrong way, and you shut it down and start the whole patient business again. Get it right, and the first thump lands and the boat comes alive underneath your feet. There was a craft in simply owning one of these, a small daily competence that never appeared on anyone's certificate. The men who ran them wore it quietly, and they wore it for life. That memory in the iron has a temperament, though, and this is where the elegance of the idea meets the reality of the man standing beside it. Picture a sawmill on a February afternoon. The engine is thumping along at its unhurried pace, the bulb holding a steady, even glow. Then the blade finds a hidden knot and the load piles on. The engine works harder, burns hotter, and the bulb starts to run away with itself, glowing far fiercer than it should. Now the fuel is lighting too early, before the piston has come up to meet it, and the machine is fighting its own rhythm. You hear it before you see anything. The smooth thump breaks into a hard metallic hammering. Knock, pre-ignition. Leave it alone and that hammering will beat the engine to pieces from the inside. The remedy was water. A controlled drip fed in to cool the bulb and drag the timing back where it belonged. On the cheapest models, the drip really was a small valve, and a man who had learned to open it a fraction when the load surged and ease it back as things settled, managing the whole thing by ear the way you learn the breathing of somebody asleep in the same room. It would be wrong, though, to leave you thinking this was all instinct and no engineering. The serious industrial machines carried governors and metered water systems that did all of that automatically as the load rose and fell. The hand on the valve was the humble end of the range. The clever end had already got to work automating the very thing that made these engines feel alive. One more habit and then we can move on, because this one becomes the heart of the story later. Under a light load, the engine does not need to fire every cycle to keep turning. so the governor lets it skip. Fire once, coast on the sheer weight of the flywheel through a stroke or 2 or 3, then fire again when the speed has bled away. Hit and miss, they called it. That skipping is why the light running beat comes out so slow, so heavy, and so peculiarly syncopated. Remember it. That irregular thump is going to matter more at the end of this than any figure I can give you. If you or your father or your grandfather ever worked a boat with one of these, or if you grew up somewhere the sound came across the water every morning, I would genuinely like to hear about it. Leave a comment. Half the reason for making these is to find the people who still remember before there is nobody left who does. Simple, safe, unfussy about fuel, and cheap to keep alive. Through the 1890s, Grantham could hardly build them fast enough. Walk into that works at its height, and it arrives through every sense at once. Hot iron and cutting oil, the sand and scorch of the foundry, and underneath it the paraffin tang of engines being run up on test. Lathes turning the length of the floor, hammers ringing on castings, and every so often the deep, deliberate knock of a finished engine, fired for the first time and asked to prove itself before it goes into a crate. Ranks of grey cylinders and flywheels standing about, heavy and honest, machined by men who could feel 1/1000th of an inch with a thumbnail. Unhurried, unglamorous Lincolnshire industry, quietly building the machine that is about to turn up on every working coastline on the planet. In May of 1892, the first 2 production engines, numbers 101 and 102, leave Grantham. They are installed at the Great Brick Hill Waterworks at Fenny Stratford, which is to say a few minutes from the shed where the paraffin went into the tin. The invention's home ground gets the very first machines off the line to pump water. They worked there until 1923, 31 years, installed while Victoria was on the throne and still turning after the Somme. That is not a lucky prototype. That is a design that was right the first time. Number 101 survives, restored, and you can go and look at it. Between 1891 and 1905, Grantham turned out 32,417 of them. After Hornsby merged with Ruston in 1918, the type kept going to about 1934, with total output from those works north of 45,000. And these engines were not only pumping water in the shires. In 1893, Hornsby won the Oil Engine Prize at the Chicago World's Fair, and the doors that opened after that are genuinely startling. A Hornsby Akroyd engine drove the generator that first lit the Statue of Liberty by electricity. Another lit the Taj Mahal. Another lit the Rock of Gibraltar. Dozens went into lighthouses running the lamps and the fog signals on headlands where nobody could get a mechanic out in under a week. And when Guglielmo Marconi needed power for his transatlantic wireless work, he took one of these for a reason that is almost too neat. An engine with no ignition system cannot possibly interfere with a radio receiver. The one thing everybody thought was primitive about it turned out to be the qualification. Grantham also built the first oil-engined locomotive at Woolwich Arsenal in 1896, and the first oil-engined tractor, and developed a track system for crossing soft ground, which it then sold off to a firm called Holt. Yes, that one. Britain invented the Caterpillar track in Lincolnshire and let that go too, but that is a different evening. Now we come to the moment that hurts. Also in 1892, an engineer called Thomas Henry Barton, working inside Hornsby's own factory, took one of these engines and stripped the vaporizer off it. In its place, he fitted a flat, wrought-iron cylinder head with a water-cooled injector, and he wound the compression up until the fuel lit from the heat of the squeeze alone. No bulb, no blow lamp, no external heat of any kind. It ran for 6 hours. Read that again, because that is a compression ignition engine running under its own power in a Lincolnshire workshop in 1892. Akroyd Stewart, by most accounts, was dismayed rather than delighted. He had a patent and a license and a growing business built around the vaporizer, and here was a man on the payroll demonstrating that the vaporizer was optional. Hornsby did not take that road. And in 1892, that was a defensible call, possibly the correct one. The low compression engine was forgiving of the metallurgy actually available. The high compression route demanded materials and precision that the decade could not reliably deliver, and a firm selling to farmers cannot afford to ship a machine that beats itself to death in a season. Keep it in mind, though. The ground under that decision was about to move, and Grantham was not going to move with it. Out in Germany, meanwhile, another man was closing on the same problem from the opposite direction, and history had already decided whose name it intended to remember. Rudolf Diesel did not get an engine running successfully until February of 1897, and his first commercial installation followed in 1898. By then, Akroyd Stewart and Hornsby had a head start of 5 or 6 years, thousands of engines already at work, and a name on lighthouses from Gibraltar to the Arctic. The head start was not enough. And here is the strange part. It was not Diesel who took the prize away from them either. The first blow came from New York. Carl Weiss was a German-born American engineer, and in 1893 he did something nobody at Grantham had thought worth doing. He took Akroyd Stuart's hot bulb principle and married it to the enclosed crankcase two-stroke arrangement worked out in England by Joseph Day. Production started in 1894 under the name of the company he formed with August Meats, and Meats and Weiss engines went on selling for the next 20 years. The second blow came from Stockholm, a full decade later. In 1903, a Swedish engineer named Erik Anton Rundlöf arrived independently at the crankcase scavenged two-stroke hot bulb and sold the rights to the firm of J and C.G. Bolinders. Bolinders had been founded in the 1840s by two brothers, Jean and Carl Gerhard Bolinder, both long dead by the time any of this happened. They had built their first internal combustion engine, a 4-stroke hot bulb, in 1893, so they were not novices. What Rundlöf handed them was the thing that changed everything, because the two-stroke fires on every revolution instead of every other one, and that lets you throw out the entire 4-stroke apparatus. The poppet valves, the push rods, the camshaft, the timing gear, roughly half the moving parts gone. The engine gets smaller, lighter, and cheaper for the power it makes, and there is far less inside it to break when you are 200 miles from anyone who could fix it. It could also do something the valved 4-stroke never could. With no fixed valve timing to obey, a competent hand could stall the engine and catch it firing the other way, running the crankshaft backwards. No gearbox required to go astern. The engine simply beat in reverse. Add total loss lubrication, where the oil is fed in and burned rather than circulated round a sump that can fail, and you have the marine engine that the sea had been waiting for since sail. Small, tough, reversible, cheap to feed, and entirely forgiving of a fisherman who is his own mechanic because there is no other mechanic. This is the part that has to be said plainly, and it is not the version most people want to hear. Nothing was stolen from Britain here. Britain was outthought, in the open, by better answers to a question it had stopped asking. Grantham kept polishing the heavy valved 4-stroke it had started with, a fine machine for a waterworks and a pumping station, and never really asked what a working boat needed. New York asked, and then Stockholm asked, and both of them built exactly that. The market went where the better marine engine was, as markets do. By the 1920s, there were more than 70 firms building these engines in Sweden alone, and Bolinders held something in the region of 80% of the world market. If this is the kind of history you want more of, the sort where the paper trail exists and somebody signed it, subscribe. There is a great deal more of it on this channel, and we are only getting further into it. And now go and look at where these engines actually ended up, because the map is the real story. Norway put them into everything that floated. Saab, Damsgaard, a dozen local makers building for a coastline where the nearest engineer might genuinely be a week away, and the weather does not negotiate. Ask around any Norwegian harbour, and someone's grandfather had one, and they will describe the blow lamp and the flywheel without hesitating, because it is not a fact they learned, it is a thing they did. Sweden, obviously, but not only at sea. Sawmills, threshing sets, tractors. To this day there are gatherings in Småland where hundreds of them are brought out and run by their owners in the open air, which is a sound I would recommend hearing at least once before it stops happening. Russia, where they hauled timber out of the rivers during the log-floating years, and where at least one working settlement took its name from the engine that did it. A village called Bolinda, in effect, named after a machine designed in Buckinghamshire. Greece, where they were still being built under license at Volos into the 1970s. India, the Baltic, the Mediterranean coast, the Far East, and Japan, where the Hornsby Akroyd design arrived within a few years of Grantham and was taken up and adapted by domestic manufacturers, running on lamp oil because petrol was expensive. They called the engine the Yakidama, the burning ball, and they called the boats fitted with it pon-pon boats, after the sound they made coming into harbour, until diesels finally displaced them in the 1950s. Every one of those places learned this engine as a local object. Almost none of them learned it as a British one. There is one moment on the water closer to home which ought to be well known and is not. In 1911, Cadbury of Bourneville put 2 boats into service on the canals, Bourneville 1 and Bourneville 2, each driven by a 15-horsepower Bolinda. They were the first self-powered motor narrowboats in the United Kingdom. Not large, not fast, just enough steady thump to move chocolate crumb under its own power for the first time. You will find period accounts that call those boats diesels. They were not. They were hot bulb engines, direct descendants of the glowing chamber in the tin shed, sold to a Birmingham chocolate firm by a Swedish company on English canals, 70 miles from where the idea was born. Fellows Morton and Clayton were watching, and from 1913 until nationalisation every motorboat they built carried a Bolinda. Britain bought its own invention back, wholesale, and never once knew that was what it was doing. But the thing this engine was asked to do that outstrips everything else did not happen on an English canal. In 1901, a Norwegian named Roald Amundsen bought a small elderly sloop called the Gjør. She was built in 1872, the year he was born, and she had spent nearly 3 decades working herring. He chose her not for strength, but for shallowness, because she could slip through uncharted channels where a proper expedition ship would find the bottom and stay there. In May of 1902 at Trondheim, he had a 13-horsepower Dan hot bulb motor fitted. It was one of the very first engines of any kind installed in a Norwegian vessel, and it was Danish, which tells you how far this idea had already scattered. 11 years after Doncaster, the machine chosen for the most dangerous voyage available on Earth came from a third country entirely. Now 13 horsepower sounds absurd, and I want to be careful here because the easy comparison is a lazy one. Horsepower is torque multiplied by speed, and these engines made their power right at the bottom of the dial, 200 or 300 revolutions a minute, with a bore you could put your fist into and a flywheel that weighed more than the man turning it. A contemporary Hornsby rated at 6 horsepower at 260 revolutions was producing something in the order of 120 pounds-feet of torque. That is not a garden machine. That is a cart horse that happens to be small. Even so, the scale of what was asked of it is difficult to hold in the head. This was not a dash across open water. Between 1903 and 1906, Amundsen and 6 companions, 7 men in total, took the Gjør through the Northwest Passage that had defeated navigators for 4 centuries. She spent the better part of 2 years frozen into a single, sheltered anchorage on King William Island, while they took magnetic readings and learned how to survive from the Inuit who lived there. The little engine sat through all of it, unheated, unattended, months at a stretch in cold that kills. Anything with more moving parts, anything wanting a specialist or a battery or a fragile electrical system would have been a death sentence in that harbour. The very crudeness that made the hot bulb unfashionable in the drawing offices of Europe was the exact quality that made it survivable at the top of the world. And when the wind failed and the ice opened and the Gjöa had to crawl through a gap under her own power, the thump that the harbours of the north knew so well started up in the Arctic and pushed the first ship in history through the Northwest Passage. The grandest and most powerful engines of that generation were never asked to do anything remotely like it. Which brings us back to the sound, because it was never only a sound. Remember the hit and miss governing: fire, coast, coast, fire. That skipping is precisely why the light running beat came out so slow and so heavy and so completely individual, and it is why men could stand on a quay in the dark and name the boat coming in before they could see her. They were not romancing. Every engine's particular pattern of firing and coasting was slightly its own, shaped by its wear, its load, its propeller, the hand that set it. A signature written in iron and inertia. The Swedes called the noise dunk. The Japanese called it pon-pon. A child on a school boat in the Florida Keys in 1954 remembered it as a slow knock, and remembered nothing else about the vessel at all, and 70 years later he still had it. And the old marine hands had one final trick that fell out of the same simplicity. To go astern, you let the engine die back almost to nothing, then caught the flywheel's momentum on the last dying stroke and flicked it into firing the other way. The whole boat reversed with no gearbox at all, nothing but timing, a good ear, and the weight of a spinning wheel of iron. By rights, the whole breed should have died in the 1920s. Diesel's compression-ignition engine was more efficient and more powerful for its size, and by then the metallurgy that had held Barton back in 1892 had caught up completely. There was no material excuse left. On any honest engineering comparison, the true compression engine had won. The hot bulb declined to notice. It did not survive on better steel. The steel had gone to its rival. It survived on plain economics in the parts of the world the modern industry preferred not to look at. It was cheaper to buy. It would eat whatever oil could be got locally. And it was simple enough that a man in a fishing village or on a farm at the end of a track could keep it alive himself, with no specialist, no catalogue, and no spare he could not improvise. Where reliability and cost mattered more than efficiency and speed, which is to say across most of the working world, this engine kept its place. Large-scale production ran on into the 1950s, decades after the textbooks had pronounced it obsolete, and there are working examples turning today. You can go and stand in front of them. The Pythagoras Works at Norrtälje, north of Stockholm, still stands as a museum, with the machinery that built these engines still running in the summer months. The gatherings in Småland bring hundreds out every year, and Hornsby No. 101, the first production engine of its kind in the world, the one that pumped water at Fenny Stratford for 31 years, sits in the Anson Engine Museum in Cheshire, where after decades in corporate lobbies and a genuine scare about it leaving the country for good, anybody can finally walk in and look at it. We assume, most of the time, that newer means better. This machine is the quiet argument against that. It has a memory. It runs on the heat of the last thing it did. It has a temperament that once demanded a human hand and a trained ear. It has a heartbeat you could name a boat by in the dark. It is about as close to alive as a lump of cast iron gets. Britain lit it. A spilled pot of paraffin in a Buckinghamshire tin shed, a patent, a Lincolnshire foundry with the nerve to build the thing when everyone else declined. And then Britain stood still, polishing a heavy first draft, while two other countries asked what the world actually needed, and went and built that instead. So find one where it still lives. A small boat in a cold harbour on a morning early enough that nothing else is moving. An old engine warming under a blow lamp, while a man watches the iron for a colour he has never once had to explain to anybody. Close your eyes. Hear the hiss of the lamp against the bulb. Then the swing of the flywheel, and the first heavy thump, and the second, and the slow, skipping beat settling into its rhythm. Smell the paraffin and the hot metal and the water on the deckboards. Picture the men in a Buckinghamshire workshop and a Lincolnshire foundry who made this thing and sent it out to pump the water and light the lighthouses and cross the ice, and who are not on a single plaque you have ever walked past. Open your eyes. The world calls it a Swedish engine. We lit it, and then we let it become somebody else's story. If you have ever heard that beat coming across the water, or your father or your grandfather ran one, tell me about it below. The boat, the harbour, the make if you know it. Those memories are not written down anywhere else, and there are not many years left in which to collect them. And if a 13-horsepower engine crossing the roof of the world is the kind of history you want more of, subscribe. There is a great deal more of it coming.